So good morning. Welcome to the fourth and final co-working session over the past 2 weeks. I'll be sharing some cooking tips as we get started in the next couple moments. And then after that, we'll have time to bond as a community, to work together, and really take up the space to be creative, to really connect, and yeah, just really connect with each other and create this space. So for this portion, I'm going to actually have everybody not on video and muted just for your privacy. And then afterwards, you can come off of mute and you can turn on your video towards the end. So I'm just stopping everybody's video just at the beginning. And yeah, super excited to have you all here. So go ahead and type in the chat. We're going to get started with roses and thorns. This is something that I really like to do with my clients because it creates a sense of community, and also oftentimes we forget to talk about and think about the positive things that happen during the week, especially during this very stressful time. So go ahead and put this in the chat. You can click your chat at the bottom of your Zoom call, the little chat bubble here. Type in one good thing and then one challenge that you're going through, so one thorn. And then I'm going to get started with the cooking tips while you're doing that. And if you're watching the replay, you can also type this in the comments or just send me an email at hello@mindbodydharma.com. Love to hear from you. Okay, so we're going to get started. So today, as I mentioned, is all about creative cooking with a limited pantry. Oftentimes, we might run out of staples and then run to the grocery store and pick up bread or milk or an alternative milk. But during the quarantine and shelter in place, it can be challenging and a little bit scary to actually go outside and get those groceries. So I'm going to share with you how you can actually make those things with just a few supplies to have on hand. And a lot of times people will just have these in their kitchen, in their pantry, or you can also pick them up and then have them for a really long time to use. So before we get started with the actual demo, I'm going to talk through two of my favorite recipes, and then I will teach you how to make alternative milk. So easy, so delicious, and a really healthy and fun way to spruce up your coffee or your tea, or you can throw it in oatmeal, which is something that I love to do as well. So Laura says, good things for her roast. Love my family and dog. Challenge is missing being with other people. Yeah, absolutely. This can be a really lonely time, and that's part of the big reason why I'm creating this space, so that we can all connect with each other. And definitely during the co-working time, we can turn on video and unmute ourselves and share and just create a really positive space. So one of my favorite recipes for dinner, we're going to go reverse order here, starting with dinner, is a bean recipe. This is super simple to make, not expensive, and very, very filling and healthy. So the first thing that you'll need for this bean recipe is some kind of dried bean. I really love Rancho Gordo. I know there are some fans listening on the call as well. They are heritage beans, so oftentimes you can't find these types of beans in stores because mass producers aren't actually selling them anymore because they're less popular. But Rancho Gordo sells them, and you can actually order them online in bulk, so highly recommend that. But you don't have to have heritage beans or fancy beans to make this. You can really use any old dried bean that you can find in the bulk section of your grocery store. So once you have some beans, you want to soak them for at least 3 hours about. I like to just soak them overnight because I don't have to think about it. But if I haven't planned ahead for dinner, then you can just start it in the morning or a couple hours before you want to actually cook dinner. So I soaked some yellow eye beans overnight in this bowl here. As you can see, there's hardly any water left because they're very thirsty. So they absorbed all the water here and they puff up, which makes it a little bit easier to cook. So once you have your beans all hydrated and ready to go, you boil them in water to soften them up a little bit more, and then you can start making any type of bean flavor that you enjoy. The one that I often go to is a simple tomato and garlic and rosemary or sage type of mixture, and it's really great if you make like a brown rice or some kind of toast and you put that on your toast with maybe a vegan cheese or a goat cheese, and it can be super yummy and filling. Yeah, Whitney says yum. Awesome. So the only things that you need for the super simple version of this recipe would be crushed tomatoes. These are just whatever brand was available and still on the shelf in the grocery store. But I always like to get organic, so that way I'm not unintentionally eating a ton of pesticides and all of that nasty stuff. So organic canned tomatoes are really useful. Mary says, I feel like I'm watching a Food Network show. I hope that's a good thing. A little like casual, more casual version of Food Network, right? But yeah, I tried to make it look as cozy as possible for all of you. So if you enjoy it. So yeah, super easy. You just have these canned tomatoes of some kind. You can also use fresh tomatoes if you have those handy. Garlic, love me some garlic, and then some kind of fresh herb, which I didn't put out on the counter here. If I was really in the Food Network, Mary, I would definitely have had that all pristine and staged and ready to go. But essentially any kind of fresh herb will do. I like rosemary or sage. So the way to cook this is, like with many recipes, you just heat up some oil that does have a high smoke point. So that means basically that you want to use like an avocado oil or maybe a coconut oil, something that isn't going to burn fast. So oftentimes we think olive oil for cooking. It actually has a lower smoke point, meaning it burns faster, and then you are consuming carcinogens in your cooking if you're cooking with olive oil on a high temperature. And since we really want to caramelize and sweat the garlic, I like to use avocado oil in my cooking, and you can buy that in bulk for not too much money, and then you'll have that for all of your cooking. So you just heat up the garlic in some olive oil after you've chopped it up. Once that's nice and toasted, you can go for kind of a brown color. You can add the beans that you've already boiled so that they're soft. In the boiling process, I wait for maybe about 10 to 20 minutes. You don't want to overboil them, otherwise they start to fall apart in your dish, unless that's something that you're going for. But so after that, then you'll add them to the pan with the garlic and the crushed, ooh, that was fun, and the crushed tomatoes and any herbs that you're adding as well. So chopped rosemary or sage. And then just let that cook until the beans are nice and soft and all of the flavors have melded together. So like I said, super easy. And then you just took, yeah, Whitney says I love mushy beans. Nice. Me too. I'm a big mushy bean fan. So then once you cook the beans, you just pair it with rice. So you can cook rice however you like to cook rice. If you are cooking brown rice, the key actually is to boil 6 cups of water and then throw in your cup of brown rice, boil that for 30 minutes, take that off the stove, drain the rice, and then cover it and steam it for 10 minutes. And it makes brown rice taste like it was actually in a rice cooker, even though it's just on your stove. So, pro tip. So I like to pair it with rice, or sometimes just like slather it on a piece of toast, English style, and maybe throw some goat cheese on it. So that's a really healthy and easy dinner. You can also throw a salad on the side, so you get your crunchy veggies, or potentially even throw some spinach in with the beans, which I've done before too. Yeah, beans on sauteed kale or chard is doing too. Yeah, absolutely. So you could just cook your beans and throw it on a salad and have kind of a warm salad, or sauteed kale. Yeah, great tip, Laura. Awesome. So moving on from dinner, I want to talk briefly about bread. I promise I'm not like an affiliate or anything of this book, but I've had this for years and years, almost over 10 years now, and it's the easiest way to make bread, I swear. So the secret behind this technique is, like the title says, you don't have to knead bread. So if you're someone who's like, oh, if only I could make my own bread, then maybe it would be a lot, yummier, fresher, easier than just going to the store. But I don't want to sit around and knead it and then rise it again and then punch it down and all of that, stuff that goes into it. Well, this recipe seriously has saved me hours of time and frustration. So you basically follow the, let's see, the main ingredients. Let me find the master recipe here. So it's basically just water, granulated yeast, so like a quick dry or rapid rise yeast or active dry yeast you can find in the store, some kind of coarse salt or kosher salt, and then flour of choice. I use gluten-free flour in a variety of mixtures, and I've talked about that before. But if you're curious about the particular mixture, honestly, it's just experimentation. You can also buy a gluten-free all-purpose flour mix and just use that. That's probably the easiest. So basically, you let the yeast and some kind of sugar that you're using to activate the yeast and warm water, let that kind of rehydrate and become alive again. And then you add the flour, you can add spices, anything like that, and just mix it and let it rise for 2 hours or so by itself. And that's it. And then you just put it on your baking stone, or maybe in a bread loaf pan if you're making sandwich bread, and then just let that cook. So it's really, really easy. I highly recommend checking it out. You can also Google the name, just like artisan bread in 5 minutes a day, if you want the actual cookbook. Or there are some blogs that like kind of spoil it and talk about how you can adapt the recipe for gluten-free cooking too, which I've definitely taken advantage of as well. So highly recommend that. All right, so let's get into the fun kind of demo-y portion, and then we'll dive into the co-working session. But before I dive in, are there any questions about the bread or the beans recipe? Just go ahead and put those in the chat if you're watching live. And I just threw a bunch of info at you. Cool. While you're thinking of questions, one thing I'll mention about cooking with limited pantries, or just when you're running out of staples, it's all about just having fun, like being playful. I think a lot of times when we're cooking, we feel like, at least I do anyway, like, oh, I have to get this perfect. I have to follow the recipe. I have to have all the ingredients. But with cooking, especially unlike baking, it's less of a science, and it's more about just having freedom to experiment, try new flavors, and say, oh, okay, this rosemary kind of goes with this. And yeah, Whitney says, shake it up, try random spice combos. Absolutely. You know, it's oftentimes when we let go of the shoulds, which is something that I talk a lot about in my coaching programs, to like really ditch the shoulds, like, oh, I should cook a certain way, or I should follow a recipe, or all the way to your self-care routine. I should meditate every single day, work out every single day, and all of these things that we put on ourselves as pressure. We can really have a lot more fun and a lot more leeway when we can cut away those shoulds and just play. Yeah. So that's really, to sum it up, besides the recipes, just to really kind of create that freedom for you to play in the kitchen and experiment. Okay, so how to make alternative milk. You really only need 2 equipment pieces, and then you're pretty much set. And you can actually get kind of creative even if you don't have these 2 things. So the first thing you need is some kind of mesh bag. So cheesecloth can work. I got this Fair Trade Ransom Creations nut milk bag. I know it's in reverse. Sorry. For you watching live, I think in the replay it like writes itself, but basically it's more than a nut milk bag. I found it on the shelf at like some co-op, but you can always find these things online too. And the key to a great nut milk is just having a fine mesh. So this particular one is an actual bag with a drawstring. You can see that. But you don't really need to have the drawstring. You can just lay some mesh on top of your jar here, which we'll use in a little bit. The second thing you need is some kind of blender. I happen to have a fancy Vitamix from a birthday present, so thank thank you, Mom. But you don't have to have a really high speed or fancy blender to do this. Really, any blender or like food processor will do. You just need to be able to chop up nuts and oats pretty finely. So the first step, I'm just reaching under here to find my pitcher. I should have had that ready. There we go. This is when I play some like funny hold music or something for all of you. Okay, so pitcher. So you need some kind of pitcher because it makes it a lot easier to pour it into the jars. But if you don't have a pitcher, you'll be fine, I promise. So step one, I'm just prepping my pitcher here, putting the bag inside and looping the top around it. So then when I'm done and I pour the mixture inside, it will drain through the mesh. So I have found this particular combination really yummy, like thick, creamy, think like Oatly style, barista blend, great in coffee and tea, but you can make literally any combination. So just like what I was saying earlier, where you can mix and match and play and do different things that work for you and like what you have on hand, don't feel like you have to stick to this particular combination. Really have fun with it. So what I do is a quarter cup of organic coconut flakes. I got these at Trader Joe's. You can also find a lot of these things at Costco and other spots. I also add a quarter cup of cashews, and I add a whole cup of rolled oats. After I add that, then I do like a splash of vanilla extract and a pinch of like some kosher salt on top. Okay, and then I like to also add almonds, so I'll do a half a cup of raw or roasted almonds, depending on whatever I have handy. And a lot of people recommend soaking all of these things ahead of time, but I never do because oftentimes I run out of alternative milk and then I'm like, I have to make more so I can drink my coffee. Because, you know, when you have your creature comforts and you crave them, then you definitely want that. So I just make it immediately afterwards and it tastes just fine. All right, so let's make it. I got about a half cup here. The almonds, so you can see. I'm taking just a scoop of the almonds, putting it in directly into my blender here. And then I'm going to also put in a cup of the rolled oats. It doesn't really matter proportion-wise how much of which thing you're adding. I just personally have found this blend to work. The idea behind it is I want to add more oats and more almonds than the higher saturated fat items. So like coconut and cashew have really high saturated fat, which is what makes it creamy and delicious. But also since I want to have it pretty healthy too, I just limit it to a small amount. So I put in about a quarter cup of cashew, and then I'm adding a quarter cup of these coconut chips here into the blender, adding some salt. I don't really measure because it makes it a little bit more fun. And then dash of cinnamon or vanilla in there. And now here's kind of where you do want to be exact. I tend to go 3-to-1 with my water to bulk ratio. So I'm going to add 3 cups of filtered water into this blender and then blend it. So since the blender is super loud and it also is kind of annoying to listen to on a recording, I'm going to pretend that I did that, just like on the Food Network, Mary, and bring out my finished oat milk and show you how you pour it in the bag. Okay, so I have a jar here. Imagine I just blended this. And now I'm pouring it into my milk bag. Okay, as you'll see, there's still some pulp here that just kind of sits at the bottom. Wash my hands. Always good to wash your hands for 20 seconds, right? In this time period. Then I take the bag by the top and I pull up in the oat milk. So you see that now a bunch of it is just sitting here in the carafe. That's because I've actually already strained this batch, so I'm doing a double strain right now. But if you're doing the first strain, you'll have a ton of pulp sitting in the bag here, and maybe it'll even be full of extra liquid. So you don't want to waste that. So what I do is I take my hand and I gently press down into the bowl, kind of like you're milking a cow, but it is an oat and nut cow that you have today. And squeeze it in there and set that aside, and then you can just pour your mixture right into your jar. I'm pouring it back into this one, but you put it in a clean jar. And you'll notice that there's still some grainy texture here that's left behind. I don't mind that, but if you want to make it super smooth, just run it through the bag a couple more times. Laura asks, are the nuts raw or roasted? Doesn't matter. It's up to you. It's kind of whatever flavor you like. Roasted is easier to digest, so if you have a sensitive tummy, I highly recommend getting roasted nuts than raw nuts. But raw nuts are normally what people use to make almond milk. So you'll find that the producers will just use raw nuts, probably because it's actually cheaper, because then they don't have to roast them and then destroy them into nut milk. But I have experimented with both of them. Does it last a long time in the refrigerator? Yeah, so it kind of depends on how fast you go through it, but general rule of thumb, like 3 days to a week. You don't really want it to like go over multiple weeks because there are absolutely no preservatives in it. It's very fresh, but I generally will make a batch at the beginning of the week and I finish it at the end of the week, and then I just make a new batch. So the next thing I want to show you is that after you squeeze out your bag the first time, you'll have this pulp. Okay, kind of looks gross, right? But it's actually delicious because you've just put all of these yummy nuts and oats and coconut into this pulp. So you can see as I'm holding it up, it's kind of wet, and that's because the coconut in there doesn't fully get juiced, like you can't extract all of the moisture, versus if I just did a nut milk or an oat milk, it would be a lot drier. So what I do with this is I keep it in a jar in the fridge, and then when I make oatmeal, I just throw in like a tablespoon or two into my normal oatmeal, and it makes it higher protein, really yummy, and kind of have like this good nut taste. And that's a great way to use like the quote unquote waste of your nut and oat milk, especially during this time when we're all trying to be more conscientious about food consumption and not wasting things. So that is it. So now that I have my delicious nut milk, I have some tea that I made here. Good Earth Sweet and Spicy, one of my faves. I'm just gonna pour a little bit in my tea, make it nice and creamy. So as you can see here, the color is really nice, really kind of thick, creamy, yummy oat and nut milk. Yay! So that is it for our creative cooking tips. Thanks everyone. I'm going to turn off the recording. So if you're watching the replay, thank you so much for tuning in. I hope this was helpful. Definitely comment below the video or send me an email at hello@mindbodydharma.com.